July 31st, 1966. Two young couples from nearby Jamestown, New York came to Beach 6 on Presque Isle to enjoy a day at the beach. At the end of the day, as they left in their automobile, their car became stuck in the sand. There was no one else left on the beach to aid them, so they decided one of the men would walk to town to find a tow truck. As the sun set, three remaining youths saw something unexplained. It was a UFO, described as both saucer-shaped and like a giant mushroom. The UFO moved across the water to the land. It hovered there over the trees and appeared to land behind the tree line. Within moments, State Park Police came to render assistance, and the youths told the officer of the craft landing in the woods. The young man, Doug Tibbetts, and the police ventured into the woods to find out what had landed. Meanwhile, the two remaining young women sat in the car for the return of the police. A few moments later, they noticed something coming from the woods. They described it as a 6-foot-tall, featureless, gorilla-like humanoid. It clawed at the car, and the women immediately began screaming and honking the car's horn. Mr. Tibbetts and the patrolman heard the commotion and came running back to the car. By the time they arrived back to the car and the young women, there was nothing to be found. Without the UFO or the creature cited by the patrolman, there was doubt, but it was evident to the police that something had violently disturbed the young women, and the case was turned over to the United States Air Force and Project Bluebook.
Within days, the U.S. Air Force did send an investigative team to Presque Isle to find out what exactly did happen at Beach 6. The scene had been left untouched by the park rangers and by the youths themselves, abandoning their car where it lay. On the beach, Air Force investigators found a strange triangular pattern that the witnesses described as a possible landing site. Also found was a strange imprint on the ground, possibly created by the creature, that had a sticky substance in it, and hair samples were found in the nearby woods. With this evidence and psychological assessments of the teenagers, the United States Air Force considered this case, Project Bluebook 10798, unsolved. Or was it? WJET-TV Channel 24's investigative reporter Brian Sheridan looked into this case a few years ago. Here is his report.
Could the truth really be out there?
Some of the people that were involved with it that night or saw things, it was a very traumatic experience. But all in all, a lot of people still once in a while will mention about the UFO that landed on Presque Isle.
That night, July 31st, 1966, made headlines and caused a frenzy. Retired park ranger Ralph Clark took us back to the scene at Beach 6. He remembers when he and his partner came upon a stalled car and two frightened teenagers just before 10 p.m.
And I said, "Doug, you didn't get help?" And they said, "No, but there's weird things going on." I said, "What weird things?" "Well, something just came down out of the sky. It started out like a basketball, real bright. It came down within 10 feet of the park, sand, about 100 yards up the beach. It hovered in the air, and it had red lights, yellow lights, orange lights, and then a white beam came out onto the beach, as though it was looking for something."
After Clark heard this amazing tale from 18-year-old Betty Jean Clem and 16-year-old Doug Tibbetts, tourists from New York State, he and his partner ran for the beach. They didn't get far when Clem sounded the car's horn in panic.
We made it back. She was hysterical, screaming, said, "We've got to get out of here. I just saw a monster." So I said, "This is enough. Everybody in the patrol car, we're going to the barracks."
Clem and Tibbetts made these drawings for police, 2 of the spacecraft and 1 of the alien. The next day, police returned to the beach, along with an Air Force major working on an investigation into UFOs called Project Bluebook. Civil defense workers also tested a strange liquid substance found in the sand and declared it safe from radiation. and police found triangular claw-like indentations that led to the water.
State police took a plaster Paris of this tripod, one of the tripods. They analyzed it. They couldn't come up with anything that I know of.
After authorities deemed the park safe, UFO spotting became the rage.
Yeah, everybody was down here having picnics and everything else at midnight looking for UFOs.
And nobody ever saw anything ever again?
No one ever saw anything again.
2 years later, the incident turned up in a psychiatric study for the Medical Times. A doctor examined Clem's mental state and wrote, "The salient details of the alleged UFO experience were fully confirmed." And to this day, the Air Force still lists the sighting at Presque Isle as unexplained. Contrary to what the police chief said in 1966, the UFO landing between Beach 6 and 7 appears to be a hoax. And it all started with a copy of Boy's Life magazine in the hands of Kim Faulkner.
In the back of Boy's Life magazine, they had a little article that you could buy these hot air balloons. So I purchased them. And when they came, they were first grade tissue paper, and you had to put them together with glue.
We found a copy of the ad from the 1966's Boy's Life magazine. You could buy 2 9-foot-tall hot air balloons for $3.50. Faulkner, then 11 years old, says he modified the plans and climbed up to the roof of his house to launch his contraption.
They had a red and white stripe, a long stripe, you know, and that had been on the top and one on the bottom with cleaner bags in the center, and it was heated by 3 pie tins, 3-story pie tins, and that's what kept it heated, and that's why it went the distance it did.
He says the wind carried the balloon in a northwesterly direction from his home at West 22nd Street in Burst. This map shows the path the balloon would have taken to make it to Presque Isle. Faulkner tried chasing it on his bike.
About 15th and Pittsburgh Avenue, I gave up, wheeled on back, tried to get my dad to take me to go see where it went. And he said, nope. He says, that went up way too high. He said, don't tell nobody. We're too close to the airport, and it'd probably interfere with the traffic.
Little did Faulkner know that 2 teenagers, Betty Jean Clem and Doug Tibbetts, would be sitting in a car on Beach 6 when the balloon came down. Or that it would result in panic, days of headlines and investigations by local police and the U.S. Air Force.
I believe it landed, or close to it. It reheated itself. Then it regained its height. It only went out so far, and then it descended into the water. And that's why there was no trace. It was first-grade tissue paper, and all they would find is maybe a few pie plates.
All of the havoc caused by the sighting made Faulkner promise his dad he'd never say anything about it. But after seeing our eerie flashback, he decided to end over 35 years of silence and speculation.
Since then, my dad has passed on, and I'm sure being up there, he's getting quite a chuckle out of this.
Though he takes credit for the UFO, Faulkner denies having anything to do with the so-called alien described by Betty Jean or the tracks found in the sand. At least it leaves some mystery in what has apparently been one of Erie's greatest hoaxes.
So the case seemed to be solved. According to Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Faulkner was a very sincere witness and was sure of what had happened that late July night in 1966. The balloon used by Mr. Faulkner can still be purchased today, and its description does not appear to be the same as to witness testimony about size, shape, and nature of the object. As indicated by the red dot here, Mr. Faulkner's residence in the 1960s was 1817 West 22nd Street, and Beach 6 was almost due north as indicated by the other red dot here. According to the report, the balloon would have to travel almost due north in order to reach Beach 6 at Presque Isle Park. According to records, on July 30th to August 1st, 1966, winds off Lake Erie were traveling southwest, varying from 9 to 22 knots. This means that the balloon would have definitely traveled to the northeast, and not near the vicinity of Beach 6. Also, it's a little reported fact, UFO was reported by more than these witnesses at Beach 6. In the August 1st, 1966 Erie Times, there's a side story that includes 8 other individuals that saw a UFO at the same evening, between the hours of 8 p.m. to midnight, shown on the map here by the multicolored dots. 2 days later, on August 3rd, 1966, 2 police officers, one from Wesleyville Borough and one from the Lawrence Park Borough, saw a bright light zigging and zagging overhead in the evening. As the morning sun came up, they saw there was a silver object that quickly flew across the lake to Canada. When asked by the news media at the time about the results of the investigation, Major William Hall, the chief investigator from the Air Force, said that his report to the Air Force officials can only be released to the public by the Secretary of the Air Force, and NICAP investigators added that the report on the sighting and the imprints found in the sand would only be released by the Air Force if they can be explained by natural phenomena. It never was. Therefore, Blue Book Case 10798 is still unsolved and unexplained.